you.
And how about it for this guy? Might he be the next mayor of San Francisco? He's definitely a sexy fool. We love him here. He's John Rothmann, the former KGO radio host. And he likes to opine, as he should, on those things that he has deep knowledge of. That's politics, history. I guess I'll just start with this mayoral thing, John. You saw the news. Kim, why don't you share the news? Maybe John isn't aware of it.
Well, I was waiting for the announcement from the Rothmann campaign that we would see a mayoral run, but now we have the Levi Strauss heir who is set to try to run. He hasn't officially announced yet, but I guess this is a guy who runs Turning Point, which is a charity for people that are found themselves in trouble. So he's got that going for him. His mother owns, I think, 11% of Levi Strauss. Her name is Mimi Haas. So he comes from, he's the Levi Strauss heir. He comes from money. And I think he might pose a real problem for the Rothmann campaign.
John, would you like
When
to
I
comment?
read the article, this is what my first thought was. Oh, no.
Now, you're talking about Daniel Lurie.
Yeah.
He's a very fine fellow. He, I believe, probably will run. London Breed is running. We have several members of the Board of Supervisors who are planning to run. I am giving it serious thought. I want you to know every day I have more and more people urge me to run, and I will make a decision at the appropriate time.
All right. Well, that's
Really?
spoken.
That's
and
what we
answered.
get from you. I mean, we're
He's
your
answering-
friend.
He's answering like a politician.
Yeah, he
Who,
is.
me?
He's absolutely answering like a politician.
No, I haven't made a formal decision yet. I am in meetings on a daily basis with various people who've asked me to run. I have a broad swath of people who have come from the left and the right. A lot of people who I respect, and but it's a big decision to make, and you don't want to run just for the sake of running. You want to run with really something to say and a platform to run on. May I, by the way, make a quick comment before we really start, Mark? And
Yes,
that is, I want to thank all of your listeners and all of you, because my numbers on my podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothmann, are soaring. We are now over 10,000. And in large measure, I think, because of your very generous plugging of the podcast. So I want to thank you very much.
Wow. Well, first of all, I love being acknowledged in any way, as you're well aware. And I congratulate you on doing well on in a short time. I think you've been on for maybe a month, right?
Yes, that's precisely correct. And it's really very gratifying, but we have a lot more to do. And may I tell you, the most interesting thing to me are the number of people who say they miss the radio. They miss the opportunity to call in and interact. And they're absolutely right. One of the real tragedies for the San Francisco Bay Area is that there is no talk radio station for local talk, for people to air their grievances. In my commentary this morning on my own podcast, I titled it Hypocrisy. And I talked about the hypocrisy we're going to talk about later on. One of the things I said is not having a talk radio station in a major media market like San Francisco is criminal. Anyway, that's...
It is wrong. And it, as you know, I think it has to do with the fact that these media mergers have permitted large companies to hold all of these different media properties. And as a result, you're just not even... the format of KGO isn't even recognized. The importance of KGO isn't even recognized. The legacy that KGO has isn't either. And it's just X's and O's, and it's just a line item. And it's easier just to get rid of it and run syndicated stuff, and you do a rev share, and that's it. I mean, that is really what happened here. It's not as though there was any sort of real evaluation of importance to the community, the way it could be sold. You certainly could have made money at KGO. I've talked about it before. WABC in New York, it was taken over. Same company, by the way, Cumulus. They sold it, and they sold it for the price of a Pacific Heights townhome, okay? And now it's making incredible money. Now it's a right-wing radio station in New York, WABC, but it's a local station. KGO, it could have been a real outpost for great talk. And if local ownership had purchased it, and it could have purchased it for a much less than WABC. I mean, Cumulus would have let that thing go. It absolutely could have been a moneymaker. And yet, here we sit, and it's not.
I agree with you, and I lament what has happened.
Yeah, and lament, yeah, I think it's a ding word. I agree. John, let's talk about these latest indictments. and other key investigations involving Donald Trump. There are now so many that it looks like a legal buffet. I don't know what what you take back to your table on that plate first, right? They started with the most tepid charges in New York, right? That's what got all of the cameras, and that was the media event. But the reality is, quickly it got into the documents case. Then it got into, as we've now seen, the J6 indictments. And eventually there'll be indictments beyond that. The Georgia case is coming as well. So please speak to all of this, if you would.
The big story is the one going on right now. We owe a great debt to the Justice Department, who have not criminalized or abused the Justice Department, but actually have pursued crimes. Donald Trump committed crimes. And I think when the indictment is released, we will see that. He attempted to subvert American democracy. He, frankly, committed sedition. And may I say to you, you opened with the electoral fraud. It's a fascinating case because indeed it was a fraud. And if you listen carefully to Kim's report, which I very much appreciated, she made clear that the elector said, "Oh, I didn't know what I was signing. I just did what President Trump asked me to do." Well, this is going to be fascinating. May I tell you what really bothers me? And I used hypocrisy as my theme this morning, is the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. Can you imagine if this were Joe Biden or Barack Obama? Jim Jordan and the House Judiciary Committee would be raising bloody murder, and they'd be going after this issue 100%, and they would be, well, attacking. Instead, what do? They obfuscate, they accuse, they defend Donald Trump. There are only 3 Republicans who have stood up, who are running for president. Congressman Hurd, former Congressman Hurd of Texas, Will Hurd, former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, and former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. May I point out that all of those in the Republican Party presidential cavalcade who have opposed Donald Trump are formers, but none of the current office holders, none of these people who have gone after Hunter Biden, for instance, or who accuse Joe Biden of accepting massive amounts of money as bribes. None of these people have been able to prove anything, and they continue to pursue that line, but they're silent on Donald Trump. It is hypocrisy, and it's dangerous, and I'm very concerned more about the attitude of Republicans and the Republican Party leadership than I am about anything else, because this country needs a vital, vibrant two-party system, and we're not getting it. So that's my take on Donald Trump. I expect an indictment. I expect he will ultimately go to trial. And if the evidence is as it appears to be, and if you've never read the January 6th committee report, which is the basis of all of this, then you're missing a tremendous read. May I also make the comment, because you alluded to it, that Donald Trump appears on Fox. And as you know, I won't call it Fox News because that would be an oxymoron. But there was a so-called town meeting last night with Sean Hannity. It wasn't a town meeting. It was the most ridiculous display of a sellout by someone who calls himself a newsman. It was just pathetic. And I know you have examples. I heard you say in the preliminary stuff, you have a recording of him on another Fox show. This is tragic. May I commend CNN, with whom I very often have problems, for at least covering this wall to wall. And that is really, really important. And Maggie Haberman of the New York Times has been absolutely superb in her coverage. And she's interviewed on a regular basis. So my commentary on Trump, I have predicted with you when we were on KGO and here with you on your podcast that Donald Trump will be indicted. And I believe that the evidence will prove, just based on the evidence we have already, that he deserves conviction. But my concern is not whether he goes to jail. I know people get upset with me for saying this. I don't want to see him go to jail. I want to see him convicted in a court of law. And I want his supporters to have to fess up to the fact that this is the ultimate Elmer Gantry of American politics. A man who has sold a lie and continues to lie. And that, to me, is the bottom line.
All right. I I want to follow up on clearly he'll be indicted, but I want to follow up on the trial here in a second. But first,
Sure.
obfuscate is a ding word, and what cavalcade? I see. Okay, yeah, that's a ding word.
No, if
and
I run for mayor, if I really run for mayor, I've got to make sure that my language is comprehensible, understandable, and that I don't get too many dings.
well, you speak
Oh.
well. Dings are a good thing. Hypocrisy. People are saying I should be dinging hypocrisy because you're using that. You did that. It was the theme of your show today. I'm not. The only reason I'm not dinging hypocrisy is because by now hypocrisy is so much a part of the vernacular. It's so. It's just. It's not vernacular to be a ding word, but it's just not. So, but John does serve them up. The only person who serves up as many ding words as John Rothman is Michael Snyder on Fridays, the Culture Blaster reviewer. So, so bravo, sir. Kim will have a question in a moment. I just want to quickly follow up. You say I predicted he'll be indicted. Clearly, he'll be indicted, John. He's getting the Target a letter on indictment, and he's. You talk about the trial, though. We all, I think, hope for justice and a fair trial. It does appear that his strategy of delay is working. It's already been delayed. Even these indictments have been delayed for some time for any number of reasons. They're collecting evidence, they're collecting testimony, they're getting depositions, etc. But my question to you is, do you think that any of this stuff will happen? I'm talking about trials and results of trials prior to the election.
Probably not. I listened very carefully yesterday to Judge Cannon, who is clearly trying to delay as long as she can.
She's the Trump-appointed attorney, right?
That Trump-appointed
judge. Appointed attorney.
My feeling is I believe in speedy justice, but more than that, the fact that he has been indicted, and you made the point earlier. I see we have another person in federal prison who is running for president. I want to thank you for that news bulletin, but. Do you understand that Eugene V. Debs ran in 1920 as the socialist candidate for president from prison? He was convicted of sedition. He was granted clemency, not a pardon, but clemency by Warren Harding on Christmas Eve, 1921. And I believe that that's probably what will happen in the case of Donald Trump. He'll ultimately be convicted. I believe that, and he'll be granted clemency. And just to set the record straight, the great criticism that people had of me when I was on KGO was my defense of Merrick Garland. I said Garland is methodical, he is careful, he is precise. That's his whole record as a judge. I want to remind everybody, and I say this as someone who lived through it, that between the time of the Watergate break-in and Richard Nixon's resignation was a little more than 2 years. It takes time to put together the evidence. And I would remind everyone that in the end, what brought Nixon down was a tape which was revealed the same week that he ultimately had to resign. A lot is going to come out about Donald Trump, and that is going to be critical. But more important in my judgment, is how the Republican Party responds. When they see the evidence, and by the way, it exists in part in the January 6th report, they will have to own up to it. And the fact that Republicans are making all these statements in defense of Donald Trump, that they're attacking Merrick Garland, that they are attacking the Justice Department, they're talking about weaponization, by the way, as Donald Trump himself talks about if he becomes president again, he'll go after his enemies. He'll use the Justice Department. Talk about a weaponization. And the hypocrisy, which I addressed this morning in my podcast, is very simply this. There is a double standard, and I regret profoundly the absence of conscience by the Republicans. It's a shame for them and for the two-party system in this country.
Well, I mean, it's clearly true. That what you said just does ring true, and it's sadly a comment on America. And, you know, you talk about a two-party system. I don't know. I mean, I think there's so much wrong with the American political system. You really should open up the hood on a bunch of it. But now you have...
Do you want to say a word about no labels? Do you want to say a word about no labels?
Oh, and yeah, no labels is the no labels is the they claim to be, as I was saying yesterday. I love the name No Labels when they're actually I think they're underpinned by right-wing ideology, aren't they, John? Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, No Labels claims that they want to come up with solutions. They did not begin as a political party. They are now talking about running candidates for president and vice president. And one of the most interesting aspects of that is Joe Manchin is the person most talked about as the potential candidate for president. Let me tell you, third parties in this country have not won an election for president since Abraham Lincoln in 1860. And the idea that they are spoilers is clear. We saw it particularly graphically in the year 2000 in Florida with Ralph Nader on the ballot and his taking away enough votes, along with Pat Buchanan, from Al Gore to ensure George W. Bush's victory in that state. I have no problem with a problem solution oriented political movement. But once they translate that, and all with dark money, we are told over $70 million in dark money. That to me is unconscionable. And we need to expose these people for what they are. I am very concerned because I want to see a real battle between two people for the presidency of the United States. And I don't want to see an election thrown as it was in 2000 because of a so-called third party which hasn't got a chance of a snowball in hell of winning. And by the way, it's almost deceptive. No Labels claimed they weren't going to run a candidate for president. They were non-political. Now they're changing their approach. I think it's terrible.
Well, I think that if you look at the people behind it, the founders, et cetera, I think they're right-wing ideologies across the board.
Well, Joe Lieberman is not a right-winger, but
he's
he
not
was one of the key people.
I know he was a Democrat, and I know he ran on for was it vice president
with Al Gore.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I consider Lieberman now. I think I'm a little more of a lefty than you are on certain things, but
no,
I don't.
He is to the right now. He certainly doesn't fit in the Democratic Party. There's no question about it. But Joe Manchin is a Democrat, maintains his support for the Democratic Party, and is critical. And we've seen this repeatedly in this very closely divided Senate. Joe Manchin remains a Democrat. I'm only asking for one thing, and that is that people understand what no labels is. You can't run for political office with no labels. You've got to be who you are. You remember Jesse Ventura, who was governor of Minnesota, who was an independent, who got himself elected governor on his celebrity. And the interesting thing was the legislature would not support him because he had no party. So he was an ineffective governor because Democrats and Republicans alike were out to get him. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a big problem here in California. Although he was a Republican, most Republicans will tell you he wasn't much of a Republican. So right. I prefer the two-party system. I'd like to see it restructured in a way. And if we had time, I would share with you two men who ran for president, one as a Republican, one as a Democrat. John W. Davis ran as a Democrat. Thomas E. Dewey ran as a Republican. Separately, over the course of 4 decades, they gave a series of lectures on the two-party political system in America. And if I were teaching a civics class, I'd require that be read because I think it's really important.
Just because we're talking about no labels and you want to make a point about no labels, then I'm going to make this point about no labels and underscore it because I think it's important. And I respect the fact that you want a viable conversation under a banner of nonpartisanship, I'm going to call it. But 2 of the 3 officers of the No Labels Party of Florida have extensive GOP connections. Its chair, Kathleen Shanahan, the CEO of an electrical construction firm. She has a long history of working for prominent Republicans. As her online biography puts it, her positions in federal and state public policy include serving as a chief of staff for Florida Governor Jeb Bush, chief of staff to Vice President-elect Dick Cheney, deputy secretary of the California Trade and Commerce, et cetera.
So you've made your point. Your point is clear. And there is no doubt.
These are people who contributed to the Trump campaign in big numbers. And you made the point well, I thought, about the fact that they're underwritten by dark money. No labels is a fraud, is what I'm saying. And I agree. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Not only do I agree, but I have a feeling you and I will be talking about that a lot in the days ahead.
John, sadly, we're in a situation with, I think, vulnerability about the next election because the seeds of doubt have been sown, even though the seeds of doubt don't need to be sown. The reality is, would you agree that a lot of the election tampering that's gone on has gone on the GOP side and in red states? And I'm sorry to make everything red-blue, but you see in Texas, for example, fewer and fewer places, polling places where you can actually vote. So and in that Sean Hannity interview to which you've referred, Trump, and you were so right, you know, the Sean Hannity thing is, don't you think, Mr. President, that blah, blah, blah. And then Sean Hannity states it out, a policy thing that Trump, of course, could never get his head around. And then Trump just sort of goes, yeah, exactly, Sean. And we need voter ID, you know. So I want to talk about the next election and how you sort of see it working from a mechanistic standpoint, you know, from the standpoint of the mechanisms of voting.
The mechanisms exist state by state. Remember that an election is not a national election, it's a state-by-state election. Every candidate for president now understands firmly, if they didn't before, that the Electoral College is what counts. Therefore, having strong organizations in each state, and let me be clear, that means that certain states are going to be targeted. That is the swing states, where you're going to see massive amounts of money spent. One of the points I made on KGO is there was no real political advertising on KGO because everybody knew the state was going to go for the Democrats. There was no doubt about it. So there will be a battle state by state, and Republicans and Democrats are gearing up for that battle. And so I believe that the fundamental integrity of the elections is sound. I believe all of these cries of election fraud are frankly ridiculous. No one doubts that Joe Biden won the election and that Donald Trump lost the election. And we have to pursue in our process of talking about this, that there is election integrity. Every time I hear somebody say, oh, the elections lack integrity, I think, what are you talking about? What nonsense. And may I say how destructive that is to America, not only at home, but abroad. The world and we, the people of this country, have to believe in that process. And let me tell you, if the process were corrupt, I would be the first one to jump in and say, well, we've got a serious problem here. But we don't have a serious problem. Donald Trump and his cohorts challenged the ballot in, I believe, it was about 70 different challenges, all of which were thrown out. Not a single one had credibility. And I would suggest to you that I do not believe election integrity is a matter of debate. We should all believe in it and subscribe to it and know that it works. And every Secretary of State, state by state, Democrat and Republican, and secretaries of state are generally the ones charged with this, make that statement. Raffensperger in Georgia, who has been the subject of abuse by Donald Trump. Let me tell you something. When that grand jury in Georgia brings down its indictment, that will be one of the key things. There was no fraud in Georgia, and all of Donald Trump's protestations to the contrary. It simply didn't happen. But you know something? And you know this, and I know this. If you repeat a lie often enough, people begin to think, maybe it's true. Robert Kennedy Jr. is a great example of that. His attack on Chinese and Ashkenazi Jews needs to be repudiated by everyone. And may I say, I was thrilled that key members of the Kennedy family have come out against Robert Kennedy Jr. And his nonsense. So these are the kinds of things, we got to knock these things down, and we got to pursue this as best we can in terms of our approach to politics.
John talks like a candidate. Mike in Willow Glen says that Rothman's campaign has already started. Come on.
Was he talking about for mayor or for president?
I'm telling you, you speak like a presidential candidate. The podcast is red hot. You can catch it wherever you listen to podcasts. John Rothman's podcast is Around the Political World with John Rothman. Love talking to you. You make a lot of sense. You're provocative. You know your stuff. I love mixing it up with John Rothman.
May I
and
say
you serve up some ding words. Yes.
Would you do me a favor? Wish your parents all the best. Tell them to stay cool. But if they listen to you on your podcast, their temperatures are entitled to rise with pride.
John Rothman, everybody. Thanks, pal.
See you Wednesday.
Love our John Rothman. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. Kim, I know he gets going, and it's tough to, tough to manage. I hope didn't mean I saw you for a moment. It felt like you wanted to ask something or say something, and then we were just kind of, it was a runaway train. Between the two of us, you can't get a word in. You're When you're muted, you definitely can't get a word in.
You're muted.
Yeah.
See, I'm not having very good luck at speaking today. No, I was going to ask you, and maybe you have a thought on this. There are 7 states in which these fake electors, alleged fake electors, were, operating. The only arrests or charges so far coming for the 16 in Michigan. At the same time, or very close to, when this target letter is sent to Trump regarding the election scam case, right? I wonder if the two cases are related. If we're going to start seeing more of the fake electors in other states being charged as well, because some information came out in the investigation into Trump. And so that's why the charges are now coming. I just wondered that.
I think that you're asking sort of, there seems to be a momentum to the indictments, and you're wondering if there's, is that a result of new evidence or whatever. Rothman's still in the green room. You want to take that, Rothman, or you want me to take it? You want to take it? Yeah? Go ahead, John.
To respond to Kim.
Go ahead, John.
I don't believe that the corruption of the Electoral College process can succeed. And I will tell you, they constantly cite Hawaii in 1960. Of course, the people who cite Hawaii in 1960 don't know their history. You, Kim, as a Hawaiian princess, if you will, should understand it was Richard Nixon who said, stop the recount in Hawaii. It won't make a difference in the election. I lost, and that's the end of it. But I don't believe the Electoral College process in and of itself, this kind of challenge will succeed. I believe other states are also looking into these challenges. But when we take a look, and you can see the actual affidavits online, you understand how ridiculous it was. When Ronna Romney, the chair of the Republican, McDaniel, I should add her last name now, when she spoke and she said, well, we were simply doing what everybody else does. We had a right to challenge. They have a right to challenge, but I want to point out to you, this is the first time we've had phony electoral lists put together and an attempt to certify them. And those lists, interestingly enough, you can get, by the way, get them all at the Library of Congress because they were all submitted as well. So all I can say is this is a fraud and should not reflect, you can be for or against the Electoral College, that's a whole other debate, but should not reflect on the fact that the Electoral College fundamental integrity in terms of electors has been preserved. And so that's my comment on it.
If you're interested in more on the Electoral College, I'll just mention this. I have a long conversation with Tom Hartman on Monday on this show. So on Monday, we talk about the origins of the Electoral College, but more to the point, the misconceptions about the Electoral College. Of course, the Electoral College is ridiculous. It's awful. It's a hateful thing, and it's destroyed the democratic republic, I believe, that we exist in America. It's utterly absurd now. It doesn't reflect the voice of the people.
Mark, may I just quickly say, let me explain to you why the Electoral College continues to exist. And if you ask Hartman, he'll tell you the same thing. Mm-hmm. The election campaign on a vote, of popular vote, can sometimes be disputed, can be very close. And we have seen that. In 1960, the election separating the popular vote between Nixon and Kennedy was 112,450 or 119,480, depending upon which count you wanted. And you could actually have come up with a count in 1960 if you took away Alabama and Mississippi, where Kennedy was not on the ballot, but the Democratic rooster was. You could have come up with a scenario where Richard Nixon actually won the popular vote. I only point out that with all its flaws, and the Electoral College has many, many flaws, the idea was really to prevent corruption. And if you go back to 1960 and you consider what happened in Illinois and in Texas, where, frankly, Dick Daley's corruption in Chicago cost Nixon Illinois, and Lyndon Johnson's corruption in Texas cost Nixon Texas, it could have been very close. So if we go to a straight popular vote and it's a narrow vote, then you've got a serious problem. So
you're telling me, let me just get clear on this. I'm out of time. So I'll deal with you next week if I have to. Are you telling me that you support the Electoral College as part of the democratic process?
No.
Good. God damn it. Jesus, are you kidding? I was ready to put John Rothman in timeout, Kim. It was an awkward moment.
You and my wife. You and my wife.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you guys
Rothman.
next week. But thank you for letting me chime in.
Yes. Love you. See you, John Rothman. Yeah. All right. Wow. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.